The desert wind carried a cruel stillness that morning, the kind that pressed against the chest and made breathing feel like borrowed time. And beneath a crooked line of cottonwood trees, 7 Apache girls hung bound by rawhide ropes, their toes barely touching the dust, their breaths shallow and burning, their strength slipping away with every passing second. Because this was not meant to be a warning or a trial, it was meant to be slow death, a message carved into flesh and silence. They had been accused without proof, captured without mercy, and left here by men who believed fear lasted longer than truth. Flies circled their faces, the sun climbed higher, and memories of laughter, mother's songs, and wide-open skies flickered like dying embers in their minds. Each girl fought the rope in her own way, some whispering prayers through cracked lips, some biting back screams so the others wouldn't lose hope. Because even here, even now, they refused to die alone. The youngest, barely more than a child, trembled uncontrollably, her vision blurring, while the eldest forced herself to stay awake, counting heartbeats, promising herself that if death came, it would not take her dignity. Time stretched cruelly, and the desert watched without pity. Miles away, a lone rancher named Caleb Harlan rode across his land, a man carved from dust and hardship. Known for keeping to himself after burying his wife years before, his heart closed like a nailed coffin. He had learned the land's language, how silence could scream when something was wrong, and that morning the silence felt wrong. His horse slowed before he even saw them, ears flattening, nostrils flaring at the scent of fear, and sweat carried on the wind. When Caleb crested the low ridge and saw the figures hanging beneath the trees, something ancient and violent tore through his chest, a rage that felt cleaner than grief, hotter than fear. He did not see enemies or strangers, he saw children being murdered by indifference. For a long moment he only stared, hands shaking, because the Wild West had taught him that getting involved often meant dying forgotten. But another lesson rose louder in him, one his father had beaten into him with words and fists alike. If you walk away from injustice, you become part of it. Caleb spurred his horse forward, dust exploding beneath the hooves, his rifle already in his hands, though there was no one left to aim it at, only the aftermath of cruelty. He cut the first rope with his knife, catching the girl as she collapsed, her body light as a bundle of sticks, breath rasping painfully. One by one he worked, fingers slick with blood where the ropes had bitten into skin, whispering, "Hold on, I've got you," though he didn't know if it was true. Some of them had gone limp, their lips blue, and fear clawed at him that he was already too late. He laid them in the shade, tore water skins open, trickling drops between cracked lips, pressing his ear to chests to listen for the faint miracle of a heartbeat. The desert offered no forgiveness, but Caleb did not stop, even when his arms burned and his eyes stung with tears. He hadn't shed since his wife died. As the girls slowly stirred, coughing, gasping, clinging to life with stubborn will, distant thunder rolled, not from the sky but from approaching riders. Caleb looked up, jaw tightening. Knowing whoever had done this might return to finish the job, he placed himself between the girls and the horizon, rifle steady, heart pounding, prepared to die if it meant buying them another minute. The girls watched him with blurred vision, a white man standing guard over them, not with chains or threats, but with quiet fury, and something fragile and dangerous sparked in their chests: hope. In the Wild West, hope was rarer than gold, and just as hard-earned. Chapter 2. The riders never came, whether driven off by fear of being seen or by the approaching storm. And when the first drops of rain fell, it felt like the land itself had chosen a side. Caleb worked through the downpour, lifting the weakest onto his horse, fashioning makeshift stretchers, guiding the others who could barely stand, his ranch now the only destination that mattered. The journey was slow and brutal, every step a test of endurance, but none of the girls asked him why he was helping them, because sometimes survival did not need explanations, only action. When they reached the ranch, Caleb opened his home without hesitation. A place that had been silent for years, suddenly filled with labored breathing, whispered Apache words, and the crackle of fire as he boiled water and tore up old sheets for bandages. He treated rope burns, fed them small spoonfuls of broth, and stood watch through the night, rifle across his knees, listening to the storm and the fragile sounds of life returning. As days passed, the girls began to heal, bodies still weak but spirits sharpening, eyes watching Caleb with a mixture of caution and gratitude. They learned his name, and he learned theirs, each name a story, a promise that they were not faceless victims, but daughters, sisters, dreamers. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the eldest spoke, her voice steady despite everything, in telling him the truth. They had been seized as scapegoats after a ranch burned, blamed because it was easier than facing the real criminals. Caleb listened without interrupting, anger simmering, knowing the law in these lands often wore a blindfold when it came to justice for native people. He realized then that saving them from the rope was only the beginning, because letting them leave without protection would be another kind of death sentence. Word spread quickly, as it always did in the West. Whispers carried by traders and drifters, some calling Caleb a fool, others a hero, and a few men arriving with hard eyes and harder intentions. Caleb met them at the fence line, calm and unyielding, making it clear that anyone who stepped onto his land looking to harm those girls would be carried off it in pieces. The girls watched from the porch, fear twisting in their stomachs, but also something new growing there, a sense of worth, of being defended not as property or burdens, but as human lives that mattered. When the men left, spitting curses into the dust, the girls stood taller, shoulders straighter, as if reclaiming parts of themselves that had been stolen. In time, the girls chose their own paths, some returning to their people with stories of survival, others staying to help rebuild the ranch, not out of obligation, but because they had found something rare in the Wild West, safety born from respect. Caleb, once a man hollowed by loss, found his nights filled with conversation, with shared meals, with laughter that startled him with its warmth. He never claimed to be their savior, and they never called him one. But they all knew the truth that a single choice, a single refusal to look away, had changed 7 fates forever. And as the sun rose over the ranch, painting the land gold, it stood as a reminder that even in the harshest times, humanity could still carve light out of darkness. The trouble Caleb feared finally came at dawn, riding in on anger and lies, a small posse of men who believed ropes were easier than truth. And as their shadows stretched across the ranch yard, the 7 Apache girls stood together, no longer trembling, their eyes steady, their wounds still healing, but their resolve unbroken. Caleb stepped forward first, voice calm, but carrying the weight of certainty, laying out what he knew, the false accusations, the burned ranch traced to rustlers who had already fled south, and something shifted in the air, because lies collapse when faced without fear. A brief standoff followed, hands hovering near holsters, hearts pounding, until the eldest girl spoke, her words clear and proud, naming witnesses, places, and times, and the truth landed like a hammer. One by one the men backed down, shame replacing cruelty, and the posse rode away, leaving dust and silence behind. That morning, the girls cut their own old ropes and burned them, watching the smoke rise as a promise that what tried to kill them would never define them again. Caleb returned to his work not as a hero, but as a man who chose to stand, and the land seemed to breathe easier for it.